We started a series on this channel where we're ranking the top 25 best FPS games from every year from the 2000 moving forward. We literally only got, I think, 1 year in, the year 2000, and you guys showed so much support, so it's back. We're going to keep it rolling, and we're going to call this a new series. 2001 is up. Welcome to ChaosGaming, everybody. Thank you for all the support on the page. And 2001 was an interesting year. It was, especially for FPS games. So drop a like, and we start off at number 25 of the best FPS games of 2001. ALCATRAZ Prison Escape. Developed by Zombie Inc. and published by none other than Activision, ALCATRAZ Prison Escape was a budget game released in late 2001 for the PC. Now, the title should have been pretty self-explanatory. You played as an inmate at Alcatraz trying to escape, and it was actually a pretty elaborate game for its time. The stealth was good. The level design was pretty interesting, and it was a pretty exciting experience. I mean, it was a good game, and you've probably never even heard of it, honestly, so give it a try if you can find it. At number 24, Men in Black the series, CRASHDOWN. Does anybody remember Men in Black the series? It was a cartoon that ran in the early 2000s for a bit. It actually had a pretty decent FPS spin-off game. I don't know why they did it, but they did. CRASHDOWN was an FPS puzzle game for the PS1. It was developed by RuneCraft. You played as the Men in Black, trying to stop aliens, of course, and they were trying to kidnap the president. It all played out the same kind of goofy charm as you'd expect from MIB, and it was simple but fun. At number 23, PARKAN Iron Strategy. It's a lesser-known series of Russian PC games that ran in the late 90s and early 2000s, and Iron Strategy was an FPS spin-off that was actually pretty good. It had mixed elements of first-person shooting with mech combat and some RTS sections as well, which is something that usually never works, but it actually did. It's hard to track down a copy of the game, but if you can, give it a go. It's one of the more unique shooters of the early 2000s. This was a Wild West of video games. Everybody was throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick. At number 22, CODENAME OUTBREAK. Another budget PC game released in late 2001 and developed by GCS Game World. Does anybody remember budget PC games? They were those $10 to $20 games you could see on a little shelf rack at the store back in the day, and were basically the early 2000s equivalent of the Steam homepage. So, CODENAME OUTBREAK was actually a really good game. Alien parasite comes to Earth, meteor shower, at which point you defend yourself from all the creepy alien-human hybrids. Now, for a short budget title, it was actually pretty good. It was. At number 21, Deadly Dozen. It's a World War II game where you play as a group of prisoners sentenced to death but given a chance at redemption by going on a series of extremely dangerous missions. Kind of like Suicide Squad in a way? I don't know. Each of the 12 characters, different set of skills. Made the gameplay pretty tactical and intense as you had to make sure you knew who was good in certain situations and who needed to be protected. It got decent reviews upon release, and I would actually like to see this concept revisited by a modern developer. There's a lot you could do with this. At number 20, Ominous Horizons, A Paladin's Calling. Does anybody remember the Roman shooter we talked about in the last video? The one called Kachumen, or I don't remember. It got a sequel, okay? This one was Ominous Horizons, A Paladin's Calling, and it was another Christian-themed FPS. In fact, I believe this is the most expensive Christian game ever made, costing a whopping $1.6 million to develop, which that's unheard of at that time for an indie game. Once again, you're a Christian student who has to do battle with Satan and his minions with gameplay very similar to Quake and Half-Life. The graphics and the gameplay, they were good. It's actually interesting to see this kind of interpretation of Christian figures. It's honestly not a bad game at all, and it had some good elements. At number 19, Secret Service. Now, there's been quite a few games just called Secret Service, and usually when a game has a simple title, it's no good. But Secret Service 2001 was actually pretty fun Rainbow Six clone, if you want to call it that, with some interesting elements. You played as a rookie Secret Service agent, and you were completing various missions to keep various people safe, and the better you perform, the higher profile the missions got. It was nothing special, but the concept was cool. Actually, once again, I would like to see something like this revisited. At number 18, Legends of Might and Magic. Now, you may not guess it from the title, but Legend of Might and Magic was actually a Counter-Strike clone. Yeah, with a fantasy twist, which was interesting. It was a multiplayer FPS game that was a pretty blatant copy-paste of the Counter-Strike skeleton, but it replaced the guns and bombs with swords, magic spells, and various fantasy creatures. Gameplay, tad simpler than Counter-Strike, which made it easier to get into. It was nothing special, but it has a cult following because of its unique concept. After all, fantasy shooters aren't something you see every day. At number 17, Aquanox. Yes, an FPS submarine shooter. Developed by Massive Development, despite it looking cheesy and having a weird concept, it's actually pretty cool. You drive around shooting enemies and gaining money that you can use to buy new abilities and weapons. It was fun. It got a handful of sequels, although it's isn't really the kind of thing that would exist today, but it was cool. At number 16, Resident Evil Survivor 2 Code Veronica. Now, this is one of the worst games in the entire series, but it had a certain so bad it's good charm to it that a lot of horror games have. It also sold decently, so Capcom rushed the sequel, this time as a spin-off called Code Veronica. Yeah. Now, I don't know really what it had negative reviews, okay? Good financial reports. I mean, if you want a horror game, it's terrible. If you want a fun, cheesy light gun shooter, go try it. At number 15, Operation Flashpoint Cold War Crisis. If the title sounds familiar, it's because that's actually the first version of Arma. Yeah, tactical shooter for the PC in 2001, developed by Bohemia Interactive. They wanted to make it realistic. Single-player campaign would give you these various locations and play for various factions during the Cold War. Then, the multiplayer featured traditional modes like TDM, Capture the Flag, and so on and so forth. It got good reviews. It sold good. It was unique. Had outstanding technical aspects as well. Plus, as a way to preserve it 10 years later, Bohemia Interactive re-released it as Arma Cold War Assault. At number 14, Red Faction. Some of you may know Red Faction. It was developed by Volition. It's a series that never quite hit mainstream, but it had a passionate community. You played as a worker on Mars in the late 21st century, and there was this intergalactic rush for resources on other planets, which bizarrely might be a reality in a few years, and Red Faction was praised for its storytelling. I mean, it was good. It was super impressive for 2001. It was popular enough to get some console ports and even a few sequels a few years down the line. Moving right along to number 13, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon. This is a franchise that has fallen down, but it had respectable beginnings. The original Ghost Recon launched on PC late 2001. It instantly garnered a ton of attention for the gameplay and the attention to detail. Tactical shooter, you and your squad, complete various missions, pay attention to the gear, all that stuff, positioning. I mean, Ghost Recon was one of the best-selling PC games of the year, and it was popular enough to get some console ports and sequels, and you guys already know the rest is history. At number 12, Tribes 2. Developed by Dynamax, it was a sci-fi shooter known for the size, the scope. You played as a soldier for several different factions in the year 3941. You take part in giant 128-person battles for control of the planet. It was a great game. It was one of the best-selling PC shooters of 2001. In the early 2000s, a lot of multiplayer shooters were trying to see how big they could make it. After all, the big shooters of the 90s were smaller team-based games like Counter-Strike and Quake, so when games like Tribes and Battlefield hit, they were game changers. At number 11, Project Eden. I would call this an ambitious game for its time. Third-person action game with first-person shooting had you play as a squad of law enforcement agents in a future world where you're trying to get to the bottom of a long series of disappearances. There's puzzles to be solved, different playable characters, unique abilities. It had some problems, but it mainly was because it was trying to do too much with limited technology, and I can applaud that. If someone were to do a 2021 remake of the game and they ironed out the kinks, this could be something, seriously. Now we've reached the top 10. X vs. Sever. Weird name. It's an FPS that was exclusive to the Game Boy Advance, which sounds like a disaster. It was actually good. The concept was based on the movie of the same name, and the gameplay is very reminiscent of the original Doom. This time, you get to run around on your Game Boy. The end result was an old-school shooter with some really clever level design and satisfying shooting, all running on a system with next to no horsepower. It was actually a technical marvel. At number 9, Rainbow Six Takedown. Missions in Korea. The original Rainbow Six launched in '98, but it was so popular, it was still getting major expansions 3 years later. Missions in Korea was that, standalone expansion, and you were exclusively doing stuff in South Korea. Come on. The game follows Team Rainbow. They do their missions. They're dealing with a group of Yakuza who have a sinister plan for the country. Missions in Korea was a great addition to the base game, and if you never got to play it before because of the regional restriction, give it a go. At number 8, Half-Life Blue Shift. Now, there's quite a few expansions of the original Half-Life. Some focus on the story, others focus on multiplayer. Blue Shift was a campaign expansion with some pretty interesting premise. Instead of people are playing as everybody's favorite scientist, Gordon Freeman, you are a random security guard at the Black Mesa Research Facility who happened to be on duty at the time of Half-Life 1's campaign. And then you just basically have to replay the base game with a new perspective, with new objectives and gameplay. It was actually a cool idea. It added a lot of depth and layers to the game's story. It was criticized for being short, but praised for its gameplay and visuals. And speaking of Half-Life, at number 7, Half-Life Decay. Another expansion in the same year. This time, designed by none other than Randy Pitchford, who you might probably know as the current CEO of Gearbox. Much like Blue Shift, You're playing again in the Half-Life 1 campaign, but from a new perspective. This time, it's a co-op shooter where you and a friend play as two scientists who were unlucky enough to be working in Black Mesa at the time of Half-Life 1, at which point, you have to put your heads together and escape. Decay was also released exclusively for the PS2, which was odd when the base game was such a landmark for PC, but it was fun. It helped I guess it helped bring the console audiences into the world of Half-Life. At number 6, Unreal Tournament Dreamcast version. Now, if you watched our ranking video of the year 2000, you probably noticed that the console versions of arena shooters were actually really good, which you wouldn't have expected because arena shooters don't exist anymore. Unreal Tournament was a game-changing arena shooter that launched on the PC in '99, but it got a Dreamcast port in 2001 that was good. Now, the Dreamcast had some impressive horsepower for a console, which allowed Epic Games, yes, Fortnite's Epic Games, to pretty much bring the entire Unreal Tournament glory to the system. Fluid gameplay, great controls, addicting combat. It was a shame that the Dreamcast flopped so hard because it was actually really good. At number 5, Serious Sam: The First Encounter. Now, when it comes to FPS icons, Serious Sam has always been overshadowed by the big boys, but why? It's awesome. Released for the PC in early 2001, it was an over-the-top FPS developed by Crow Team that had you playing as the ultimate boss, blasting through hundreds and hundreds of enemies while carrying a whole arsenal of weapons in his jean pockets. It's classic, old-school FPS. I mean, you're traveling to plenty of eye-candy locations while blasting through enemies, and you're not really thinking about the story. It was praised for its gameplay and fun factor, and it helped give birth to another beloved franchise, but underrated FPS franchise. At number 4, Clive Barker's Undying. Clive Barker gave it his best throughout the 2000s. For those that don't know, he was an acclaimed horror author, and in the 2000s, he worked with a few different developers to try and bring his worlds to life through video games. Undying was released for the PC in February of 2001 because nothing says scary like Valentine's Day. You played as a paranormal adventurer investigating a creepy cult, I guess, at a creepy estate. It was cool. It looked cool. I mean, I don't know. Brand new horror IP. It didn't sell very well, but go give it a try if you can find it. At number 3, Return to Castle Wolfenstein. Now, the New Order is usually considered the best in the series, but Return to Castle is close. Developed by Grey Matter Interactive, the game launched on the PC in late 2001. It blew people away. It was the point in time where shooters were starting to move away from that super fast-paced vibe of Quake and Unreal and more to a slower, more grounded, methodical feel like Half-Life. Return to Castle Wolfenstein took the best of both worlds, gave us an extremely fun campaign, and it was cool. I mean, it was. Had a popular game or multiplayer mode as well. Not many people remember that. It was excellent all the way around, and give it a go. At number 2, Aliens vs. Predator 2. Now, despite how awful the AVP movies are, the games are great. And almost everybody will agree that AVP 2 is the best. Developed by Monolith Productions. It launched in October of 2001 and expanded upon the first game in every way. 3 campaigns, Human Predator and Xenomorph, each one played super differently. Plus, you had the giant online multiplayer mode that was praised for its asymmetrical nature as different players were playing as different species, and it made for this super unique experience compared to other shooters. If you've been waiting around for AVP to be treated with respect again, I suggest you go download AVP 2 on Steam and give it a playthrough. At number 1, the best FPS game of 2001, without a doubt, Halo Combat Evolved. Biggest game changer, too. It was the launch title for the original Xbox, and it blew people away. Up until this point, console shooters were a new thing, but Halo showed everybody how it was done. New controls, smooth gameplay, fantastic level design, and a story that gave birth to one of the biggest franchises in gaming history. I mean, do I even need to bring up multiplayer? You all knew Halo would be number 1 today. There's no denying it was the best shooter of 2001. If you guys made it to the end of the video and you want to see 2002, show some love. I'll see you soon.